I figured what we do today, we have this power platform chair here. It's a permobil F3, but I'm really curious to take the plastics off and see how the mounting of the control modules has changed. The ICS seating controller is now no longer in the front because it's integrated into the main module in the back, and apparently that one has gotten a lot bigger. I took a brief look at a chair at sort of a trade show last year sometime, but now that we have one here, I'm super interested to see for myself. These chairs are basically the same as they were before, but Power Platform is their new electronic system. You can tell because the screen looks like this. It's a lot darker in the background and there's a lot more text on here. And Power Platform is available with this PJSM joystick as well as the CJSM, which is the slightly larger one with 2 buttons. Here's an example of a CJSM2. Screen's a little bit bigger and it's got 2 buttons on it. Also for reference, here's what a typical RNet joystick screen looks like. This design has not changed since they originally came out with this joystick. But as you can see, this one has a refresh. There's a different screen that can basically redraw everything on there. I don't know if you can make the text larger or smaller on there yet, but anyways, there it is. I think the first thing we're gonna do is pop that front cover and have a look. So let's get our seat lift up all the way here. I'm not expecting to see a whole lot underneath there, seeing as how the ICS or seating controller is built into the main controller now. But let's take a look and see what there is to see. On the front at least, the plastics look like they're exactly the same as they were on the previous version. And we've got 2 thumb screws up here on the top. I don't know if these have ever been removed since this thing was built. Now this chair has all 4 power functions as well. Let's see if we can get this off of here. These usually kind of sound like braking when you remove them, but they usually don't. It would appear as though everything is as it was before, but we're just missing the ICS module and the bracketry that would hold it. This here is for our front light. Then we've got the tilt motor down here, which is sometimes referred to as the lift motor, depending on the configuration. Permobil has a strange naming scheme for things. If your chair only has tilt but not lift, they call this a tilt motor. But seeing as how this chair has a lift and a tilt function, this is now called the lift motor, even though there's another actuator up inside here that actually takes care of the lifting. I mean, technically though, those 2 actuators work in tandem to bring the seat height up. But yeah, everything looks pretty much the same under here. Got our same metal bracketry here. And there are a few holes here that looks like you can mount the previous hardware that used to be in here. So kind of makes sense to me that they didn't change the design of any of this and they just removed everything and left it the same. Another interesting thing, seeing as how we don't have the ICS module up here, is we just have a single cable now, which is significantly thicker than it used to be, but that snakes its way up here into the front. And then it looks like, yeah, it doesn't actually connect to anything in here. It just comes down from the top, goes through this new sort of redesigned housing and straight out to the back where the controller is. And that's pretty much it. Our lift actuator, wiring for that, headlight wiring, and yeah, that's all. Let's get this thing turned around here and see what's going on in the back. I think that's where all the interesting stuff is gonna be. Another look here at that single cable that comes down and goes up here, up in the front, snakes its way along here, then goes up into the back. And I guess we'll open that in a few minutes. We've already got the thing up in the air. I believe this is still using those horrific clips under here, and our color accents are still basically held on by nothing. These will come off at the slightest of breeze. Well, we just kind of pop this off, wiggle it out of place. That comes up. Now you can see already here, this is packed full of a lot more stuff. I'm assuming this is going to be some sort of antenna or something like that. Now this looks to be pretty much the same as it was previously. We've got the really thin circuit board or ribbon cable here and the normal LED lights. We've got a hole here to reach through to the circuit breaker, which actually we will turn that off. Then we've got the little piece of Velcro here with the glue behind it that almost always fails. There's that piece of Velcro I was talking about. The back cover just kind of attaches to this circuit breaker. And it's interesting, this is sort of a generic DIN rail mount. If you pull that little latch, then this comes right off of here. And this is an off-the-shelf DIN rail circuit breaker for DC. So kind of interesting. Seems like our battery cables are fairly tight in there. So we'll clip that back in place. Then we can see down here our main control module. Over here in this corner is the connection for all of the seating actuators. So this goes up front to the tilt actuator. We've got a single port right there for that. And it looks like we've got a few other pins over here. I'm not sure what those are for. And then our light wiring is right here. It has its own connector. So that's kind of cool. That's all broken out. So it makes me think, I wonder if you get one of these chairs that doesn't come with a lighting kit, I would assume it's still gonna have these connectors right here. Do these have latches? Yeah, they're the little, that is a slightly different connector actually. Yeah, I was thinking at first it was one of the OSEP style or whatever those connectors are called, but yeah, you can see a little 3-pin one there, and that's going to our rear lights. Then there's a slightly wider one up front here. This looks to be a 6-pin connector. There's the look of that. Now I'm gonna get some photos of all these and I will post them on the website. I'll get some links to that so you guys can try and source these on your own. And you can see our little connections right down here for those. So yeah, the entire lighting package, headlights, turn signals, and taillights is all right here. So that's kind of cool. And they have little connectors with retention clips on them. Then over here, we've got this giant bus cable. Oh man, look at that. Man, that's like some sort of crazy new style Arnet bus cable, but it's got 4 ports on it, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then 7 smaller pins, and that plugs in here. Oh, that says seat is how it's labeled there. Then we have 2 other Arnet ports that are standard. Well, actually, no. They're not standard. These are the 6-pin ones. Yeah, you can see there, we've got 2 additional pins and then sort of this weird upside down smiley face slot right here for the connector on it. We'll look at the other end of that cable when we're messing around with the seating up top. Then our motor connectors here are on the sides of this module, and those appear to be, yeah, standard ones. It says M1 right there. And those just plug in like so. Those actually seem to connect a lot better than the other ones did. The other ones went straight into the module from the plastic into the metal. This one has another like plastic, or it feels like a glass fiber reinforced sort of plastic or nylon or something, but those click in a lot better. So I don't think we should have the issue that the other chairs had of these kind of working loose over time. They actually take quite a bit of determination to get them unplugged and plugged back in again. And it looks like the module has 2 screws holding it on. There's one right here, another one over there. The whole thing is actually pretty thin. If you look here, I'm pretty sure this is going to be our Wi-Fi/GPS module. We have 3 wires coming out of this, and those go, yeah, it looks like they, here, let's unplug the lighting again. Oh, yep, sure enough. We have some SMA style antenna connectors down here. Yeah, you can see these right here. That's an interesting adapter. So it's got a little plastic plug with a retention clip, but then we've got sort of a, I think it's SMA, but sort of a pass-through. And if you look at the inside here, you can see that's just a regular antenna. We've got a blue one and a brown one. Oh wait, there's another one over here. Are these labeled? Hang on. Oh yeah, so this says 4G on it. This one says GPS and BD. And there's another one over here. And this one is labeled 4G DIV. So I'm assuming we're running a double diversity setup with the LTE or 4G. And it's got 2 antennas. That's why it says DIV. Would assume that means for diversity. Hang on, do these things come off of here? So these seem to rotate pretty freely. I'm not gonna try and break that free, but that might unplug from there. And that's just down here in this corner with the lighting and everything. So I'm really curious about the cooling with this thing. Seeing as how we've got all these modules inside one housing now, I don't really see any cooling fins here. And it's mounted directly, yeah, it looks like it's mounted to this plate back here. So I think what I'm gonna do is unhook all of this, and then we're gonna try and pull this off of here and see what it looks like. And it'll be a little bit easier to show you the module because we've got white and black things here, and it's really hard to light a video with 2 contrasty things like that and actually see what's going on. Now we do have the breaker turned off, so we're just unplugging this. to be really careful with our light wiring here. Let's kind of pull that out of the way. There we go. We'll unplug all of our antennas yet again. I'm curious if these are keyed. We have these two diversity connectors. They are not keyed. The LG antennas will clip into either port, which shouldn't necessarily matter depending on how they have it set up. Oh, and the obvious giant power connector here. This is our battery connection, you can see there. And got some pretty good sized cables on this, and those kind of just loop around here. Yeah, looks like we just have 2 screws that hold this entire thing on here. What do we reckon those are? Probably 8mm. Sure enough. And they're just little tiny nylocks, so I'd say it's a little more than hand tight. Actually, these are pretty interesting. They are nylocks, but they have this flange on the edge of them here, so that eliminates the need for a washer. Looks like our cable retention brackets. Okay, so we have a slot over here on the bottom of this, dropping everything. And this slots into that, then comes up and picks up this one bolt right here. Now, this does look kind of bad on camera, but this wiring layout is actually not bad. Looks like we gotta pull the breaker off of here as well. Just kind of stick that up top. I think that actually gives us enough room to slide this out of here. Yeah, there we go. So, the back of this is completely flat. The whole thing is not actually that thick in the grand scheme of things. I'm assuming our motor controller or the motor drivers are up here in this area. So I'm not sure how this thing will do as far as overheating goes. We have zero passive cooling on this thing, and the top of this is obstructed by the circuit breaker and this antenna. And the way this back is set up, there's basically zero airflow. Now, I don't know if we would need it, but in my mind, 120 amps of power going through here, seems like there should be some cooling maybe. But then again, I don't know. You can see a little diagram right here. We've got the, is that charging? Oh, this is the diagram for over here. So yeah, I was kind of wondering if this was the standard RNet charging breakout, and it is. So on the other chairs, or the older chairs, that have the charging port on the back of them, or on the base, it plugs into here. So we have plus, minus, and inhibit. So interesting to see that. Then we've got the logos here for the 2 radios. Then I'm guessing that's a Bluetooth, but I think Bluetooth and GPS is shared on this thing. Yeah, GPS and Bluetooth is on the same antenna. Yeah, we've got a couple of different screw arrangements here. We've got some larger, heavier duty fasteners up here, and then some smaller ones down here. So I think this is divided up like I was thinking. Oh yeah, actually, the cover is split right here. Okay, I think we're gonna take this apart. So this is our motor driver section, and down here is the rest of our electronics. Again, this is significantly smaller as far as thermal mass goes than the old controllers were. So I don't know, it's entirely possible that, you know, since RNet has been designed, there's been a lot of updates and improvements, and you know, there's different MOSFETs or transistors that can handle more switching. On the old ones, they had rows and banks of those things. So maybe they just went with slightly larger packages that can handle more power output than the previous ones. Although the efficiency comes into mind, because if you've got a fewer number of switching components in here, you have less surface area to dissipate the heat. Anyways, enough talking. Let's open this. This isn't the most ideal filming setup, but I'm trying to minimize the number of times I get up and off the floor. Looks like we've got some Torx fasteners here. I am assuming that there's going to be some clamping in here. That's how they did it on the previous ones, to get the heat sinks to engage properly. So these might be kind of tight. Yeah, I cannot get those by hand. So we will employ the socket and ratchet method here. Just just gonna look here and make sure. I'm not seeing any stickers or anything that are gonna prevent this from opening. Now this chair is on loan to me, and we're gonna, I mean, obviously we're taking this module apart, but we're not gonna go too crazy with a lot of the testing and like firmware updates and stuff like that. These are fairly short fasteners. So I'm not expecting this to spring off of here like maybe it was like the old style. Like I believe it's Quantum. Quantum has giant springs inside theirs, and it ensures that the surfaces that get hot will be in contact with the fins or the thermal mass on the back. Come out of there, you. All right, what are we expecting? I'm pretty sure very similar, but everything just condensed into a smaller number of packages. Okay. Definitely sort of a pot metal material. For those of you that like the sound of that, whoa. The back of this feels like it's plastic. Is it? No? Okay, getting ahead of myself. Let's get our weather seal out of here. Actually, that is shared between the two halves. Let's go ahead and take the other half off while we're here. Yeah, I can't tell if this back cover is plastic or not. Oh, wait. Oh, no, that's metal. Okay. At first I thought it was plastic and I was going to be confused because our MOSFETs are pressed up against the back of it. Let's get this off now. Oh, is it all? Interesting. Oh, look at that. So we have the same number of MOSFETs that we did before. And we have these little blue things here. This is sort of a silicone-y type material, and all of these little blue things interface with these holes, and I guess that's putting pressure on each one of those as it's needed to push it down here. Now no thermal compound on these, however we do have some thermal pads on the back of this. Yeah, those are thermal pads. And we have a piece of foam here that looks like some components were kind of pressed into it. You can see here this area of metal is a lot thicker than this part. So we do have a bit of thermal mass going on here, and the top half of this is in fact what's dissipating the heat. So interesting to see that. Interesting how this seal works. Looks like it goes around the bottom, then loops over the top that go into the holes that hold it into place. So here's our weather sealing gasket. Does not appear to be a lip seal. Oh wait, yeah, so there's a lip seal. The back, I think you might be able to see that, has our sections here, and then the front is just completely flat. Looks like this cover might be integral to the board. So this board here ends right down there. I think you can just see that. And then we've got our other board up here. And again, I'm gonna have photos of all this stuff so you guys can take a closer look at it. But we have a QUECTEL. Let's see if we can get the lighting here in such a way that you can read that. Kind of. Yeah, so they just took all the existing modules and basically put them all onto one PCB. Got our Curtis Wright logo down there, makers of RNet. Got a bunch of, oh! Ethernet and Bluetooth. Connector 7. We've got a debug port here. These are all labeled on here, like screened on. Yeah, they're all labeled like connector 1, 2, 7, something JTAG right there. Huh, interesting. Now I wonder how this piece of plastic comes off. It looks like our connectors are attached to the PCB. I don't know if there's any screws under these stickers. Don't really feel anything. So this should come off, maybe? Oh wait, there are screws. Okay, so this board lifts off, and then there's screws underneath that hold the other board on. Let's see, what does our board-to-board interconnect look like here? Let me grab a flashlight before I go ripping on stuff. Okay, those will safely lift straight off of here. There we go. You can see we've got a bunch of board interconnects here. Those are actually fairly nice little connectors. And we've got a bunch more packages on here. And the thing is conformally coated. See how it's all shiny? Well, at least most of it is. It ends over here where these connectors are. And yeah, there's a few pins missing, but they did make an attempt to put a coating for water resistance on here. That's what conformal coating is. And we got a big ol', let's see, is this gonna be a battery for a real-time clock or something like that? Yeah, 3.5 volts. So hopefully taking this apart doesn't do something obnoxious that makes it not want to work again. But once again, I do have permission to do this. And our other board here appears to be fastened in place with 3 screws. So the charging port is integrated to this board, obviously, because that's part of the RNet system. But our ICS seating connector is also part of this board. I wonder if that just passes through and was just a side product of the design. Because the ICS module, I don't exactly know who makes it, but it's more of a permobil-ish thing. I mean, I suppose it could be made by Curtiss-Wright. Unless, because the main RNet control modules do have the capability of controlling, I think usually 1 seating channel. So maybe they just pinned out the connector there and they're doing all their spoofing, as it were, on this board. So yeah, pretty interesting. Got a ground pad over here, another one over here. Here's our RNet ports here. You can see we're definitely using lead-free solder on these. And same with the conformal coating on this. The board is about 90% covered. We've got our main relay here that supplies power. This is that click that you hear, well, aside from the brakes, but this is that click you hear from deep within the chair when you start moving and after you stop. And you've got our big caps here. I don't know what brand these things are. I don't know if it necessarily matters. It says KZE. Not familiar with those. They are 35 volt, 1200 microfarad. I wonder if these are still charged as I'm grabbing this thing with my hands. They don't seem to be. Oh, look at that. We have bleed off resistors for those caps. These appear to all be in parallel. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, those are all in parallel, and they do have bleed off resistors. Interesting. Cool. Well, I guess we have sort of miniaturized things a little bit. We are dissipating the same amount of heat, however, in a much less thermally dense casing. It is a pretty decent thickness, I guess, but cooling only works until you get thermally saturated. And then where does the heat go from there? Because, like I say, we're kind of working inside of it's not airtight, but that housing definitely doesn't have airflow. All right, I'm gonna get some pictures of all this and then we will continue on. I'm in the middle of putting this back together and this makes sense now. This little foam block right here is putting pressure on this lower board and all of our board-to-board interconnects are underneath here. So this little piece of foam keeps a little bit of positive pressure on there. It is interesting that it's only here in the middle. If I was designing this, I probably would have put another section on each side as well. But in theory, if you keep pressure right here, the other connectors on the side should hold down. But yeah, interesting stuff. just getting all the screws and everything tightened back down on here. Now, I'm no engineer, but I certainly would have designed this thing with a little bit more thermal mass in mind. And by the way, being an engineer versus not has to do with your schooling, but the main part is you have to be employed in a relevant field. And I'm not currently employed in an electronics related field. So just throwing that out there. Now, when it comes to designing a product to make sure it has appropriate thermal mass, there are a lot of things to consider. And one of them is we do have this mounted to a giant metal chassis. Now, this metal's not super thick, but it is something. Like I said, I'm just really curious if any of you have had issues with these power platform chairs overheating or slowing down on you, is what they call thermal rollback, when you go up any sort of hill and think to yourself, that wasn't really doing that much. Why did it do that? I am kind of noticing here, we've got some of these really small wires, like for the brake cables, and they are not sheathed. We've got some pretty sharp metal bracketry here. It has been deburred and rounded down a little bit, but I've rerouted some of this stuff in a way to keep these really thin wires from rubbing up against metal components. It's kind of the same way over here on the other side, but yeah, I think we should be okay though. Let's go ahead and power this hoopty back on and see if it still thinks it's a chair. Didn't hear any relays clicking. That was the ICS module on the older chairs though. Now let's hit the power switch and see what happens. We should get a brake error, yeah. So, seems to work. How about our seating? Yeah, everything seems fine there, excellent. Let's get our rear covers put back on here. I think we've seen everything we need to see in here. Yeah, it's really nice to see that little retention clip down in here to hold this cable and keep it from damaging the flexible ribbon cable for the lights. I still have these little plastic things on this back case that can be damaged easily, but I think we're okay there. And back up we go. Our LED lights kind of press against a bunch of stuff, but what are you gonna do? The Velcro seems to be holding. Its days are numbered, I guarantee it. Then, oh, did they change the clips? No, they didn't. They still have these obnoxious plastic things in here that you have to sort of press down on as you slide forward, and hopefully they don't break. I think that one's engaged. This one's not. Come on. There we go. And yep, we're all on there. Sweet. These trim pieces, man. I wound up hot gluing mine in place. Someone had a really good suggestion though, and that was to pull these off, take the top cover off, but then get a little piece of toothpick or something. Sorry, this is really hard to see, but get a little piece of toothpick or something, put it back through here and jam that toothpick or a little screw into these little little wedges that stick out here, and that would hold these on. Because right now they're just kind of relying on very minor frictal forces and hopes and dreams to stay attached. I mean, maybe that's all right. Hopes and dreams seem to work for automatic transmissions, and those last a while. We're not going to bother looking at the motors or anything down here. Nothing's changed there. I can see they're basically exactly the same. If there are any changes, they would be very, very small and inside the motors. But Permobil likes to use the same components on as many chairs as possible, so it would be highly unlikely that they would change those just for this newer generation of chair. They updated them in, I think, 2020, 2021, somewhere in there, so that the two-pole motors have probably 20% more torque than they used to. And these things are way more powerful than typical 2-pole motors. And I don't think they would have any reason to mess with that unless they needed to change something because of the lack of thermal mass and cooling. But sorry, I just keep talking about thermal stuff. It's one of my little areas that I kind of geek out on. Heat dissipation is its own science, trust me. And lastly, before the camera battery dies, and before we lower the seat down and take a look under there, let's get this front cover back on. And it is exactly the same as any other F3. Come here, chair. And we still have the same little gap in the plastics back here that we've had for years. This gap right here in the plastics is exactly how this is supposed to be. So if you're trying to get this together and you're like, oh, I can't get the pieces to fit. That's how they are. If you push these all the way together, you won't be able to get this thumb screw in. Does it still drive under its own power? Hey, look at that, it does. And for reference, nothing has changed under here. This is our seat lift actuator here. And you might be able to just see the screw up in there. That basically controls the tilt of the back of the chair. So your tilt actuator lifts the front up and this thing contracts and that pulls the back of the chair up like this. But there's significantly less wiring under here because, well, everything's been pulled into that one giant cable. That's this guy right here. So it's obviously a lot less flexible than the other one, but it should work pretty good because you don't have a whole bunch of stuff you're trying to keep in place. And I think the last thing to look at on this chair is behind this cover here. And they have changed it a little bit. I already partially removed this, but I'll show you how it goes on here. There's a couple of hooks on the top of this thing you can see right here. And those basically just clip into this track on the top here. The bottom part rests right here on this little plastic tab on each side. Those basically rest right here on the bottom, and then those hooks on top go into one of these little track holes here. As far as the bottom goes, they finally got rid of the plastic that tends to break all the time. So now we have these, let's see here if I can turn a little bit. Now we have these semicircular pieces. Before, these used to extend out and sort of snap into place, but those always broke. So they finally got rid of that. These things just basically sit on top of that bar that's under the chair. This one right here on each side. They basically just sit on top of that, and the whole thing being pressed down and clipped in up top here keeps it from coming off. But if we look down in here, we can see we've got our actuator connectors here on the bottom, and these are basically the same. Actually, maybe they are different. Okay, so these are different now. Well, they're these little square 4-pin things instead of the sort of 3-pin ICS ones. Then we've got our joystick cable that plugs in right here. This is just a standard RNet cable that goes out to the joystick. It is not the 6-pin version. However, these ports do have the 6-pin option. They are backwards compatible, so you can plug in regular RNet style connectors, like if you need an input-output module or some other adaptive controls. And then this giant cable here is the one that goes down to the seat base that we looked at before. So this is just a single cable, which is much larger than it was previously, but I kind of like the idea of just having one cable running down there. Granted, we do have the possibility of that cable having a lot more conductors and thus being able to break internally a little bit easier, but less stuff means less things that are going to get caught, so I don't know, one way or the other. Oh, that's interesting. It says 5 volts, 2 amps right there. Is that a USB connector? Luckily, this whole thing just kind of pulls right out of here. Yeah, it says 5 volts, 2 amps. I'm guessing that's... Oh wait, does this chair have a USB charger on it? Oh yeah, it does. Okay, so that makes more sense. I was gonna say I was wrong. So I was gonna say the ICS cables are now this 4-pin thing, but they're not. I just wasn't underneath there and I wasn't looking properly. We still have the standard actuator connectors that you can see right here. That was for the USB charger. That's funny. Huh. So looks like they're using 4-pin cables and they I have an extra conductor cut and wrapped up here, but okay, that's a lot better. It's nice to have the same actuator connectors that we had previously, but you can see there, we've got our giant chassis bus cable and then 2 RNet ports. And if we look closely at these RNet ports, I don't know if I can do this without being shaky, you can see we've got the extra pins there and also that sort of smiley face slot so that you can't accidentally plug in the wrong ones. Because if you tried to plug in a 6-pin cable to a port that did not have those, it would bend the pins. So I'm assuming they did that to keep from damaging cables if you try and plug it into the wrong spot. I unfortunately do not have any of the 6-pin RNet cables to show you those, but yeah, anyhow, we have the usual spool of cable back here. Let me plug this back in while I can actually see it. I'm done getting out of my chair for today, so I didn't really want to get on the floor again to look at this. But this whole thing just kind of friction fits in here. We got this little shelf here, and the top it goes up on. So you just kind of put it in place, and the friction just holds it in. So put that up in here, and our joystick, and boom, there we go. It's back to being a chair. Kind of holding this camera tripod in my lap. Let me see if I can illustrate how semi-annoying it is to put this back cover on. As you notice here, these plastic standoffs don't really fit in place, so you have to kind of get one of them in there like that, sort of lift it up and turn it, get the one on the right in place, and kind of get that one in place. And these are just kind of sitting here now, so as you get that, you fold this up, watch your cables, make sure they don't pinch. Then you can see this doesn't fit, so you have to go all the way up and over, then bring it back down. And over here in this side, this little piece right here has to hit the bottom of this. So I don't know if you can see that. So you have to kind of get that lined up. And then these pins up here are going to be exerting a lot of pressure. So you just kind of push those forward. Then these have to line up with this track slot. So you gotta push it to the right here just a little bit. And then there we go, it snaps into place. So to get this out of here, I guess you would kind of put a screwdriver or something in here and pry this whole thing kind of like that to get these hooks out. I mean, the old ones held on with screws, which was fine, but whatever they did seems to work. It all holds in place and it doesn't seem to rattle. And there you go. That is a quick, in-depth look at the new power platform system. The idea with this system is that Permobil is reducing the number of modules they have and more or less pulling everything in-house. And all of those systems, now that they're on the same control module, can have their firmware updated and settings tweaked. And I just realized I didn't see a gyro. I assumed there was one inside that module somewhere. I'm sure one of those chips was probably one. I didn't see anything external though. Huh, I'll have to look back over the photos. But anyways, the thought is they can have less reliance on outside companies like Curtiss-Wright when there's a problem, and they can make changes and updates on their own. Now, obviously, Curtiss-Wright still built this whole system, and there's a much larger discussion about what the heck Permobil's doing right now in general, but I like the idea of this. Reducing complexity, kind of, and putting everything into one unified, well, platform. It's basically a bunch of hardware now. The software controls it all. It did before, but there's a lot more granular control over everything. By that, I mean they can push a firmware update that allows you to change the size of the text on the screen. Apparently that's not possible currently, but the way the system is now, the joystick is not completely locked off in its own separate entity. Everything can be pushed over the air, and it allows, I think, for a better user experience. That leads into a further discussion, like I kind of mentioned before, where constant firmware updates can lead to more problems. And I hear from people on a daily basis about firmware updates on these chairs causing more problems. So I'm not sure what their plan overall is. I can see a broad general view of what they're trying to do, and I like that concept, but implementing it and making everything work correctly, that's yet to be seen. Like, we still don't have programmers for these things. The programmer that Curtis Wright made for this chair, or that's compatible with it, is that little Wi-Fi dongle, the one that I spent a bunch of money on. Still currently doesn't work with this, and it would be real easy for Permobil just to not develop anything that allows people to program stuff. There are rumors of them creating a user-focused programming app. Obviously, it would be fairly limited for the amount of stuff you can change, but right now we don't have onboard programming. There are no dongles you can plug into this. The wireless one doesn't seem to work. The OEM ones don't work, the old style USB ones. So I don't know. Again, you can decide for yourself. There's what everything looks like. It all looks fine. I'm curious though if you have had any issues with overheating or these chairs crapping out going up a hill. Come to think of it, we might have to test that while I still have this chair. There is one spot near here that, well, the Amy Lore, the new Bounder, my old C300, all of which can't make it up the hill. This F3 I'm sitting in from 2021, non-power platform, does it just fine. So it might be interesting to take that chair over there and see how it does. Anyways, I've been blathering on for long enough. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and share your experiences with Permobil Power Platform down below. As always, we like to have a discussion if we can and share information, and I'm still very new to this system and I have to send this thing back to its owner soon. I'm hoping to get my own at some point so I can actually do a lot more testing and maybe breaking of things. But anyways, I'll catch you guys Thursday on the live stream, and happy holidays or whatever is happening tomorrow.